Don't flinch. This is the moment they weren't supposed to let you hear about. Because somewhere behind a locked door, under fluorescent lights that hum like a lie detector, a file got opened that wasn't meant to exist. Pages too thick, footnotes too calm. Timelines that don't panic when they should. And the air in that room changed, not loud, not dramatic, just heavy enough that everyone stopped breathing at the same time. That's when the question slipped out, not shouted, not announced. Asked the way men ask when certainty collapses into dread. Who the hell built this? You felt that, didn't you? That quiet shiver. Because they weren't asking about a plan. They weren't asking about a crime. They were asking about you. See, they're used to files that scream, files that begin, files that explain themselves to death. Yours didn't. Yours just sat there, calm, surgical, like it already knew who would read it and how little time they'd have to understand it. You didn't leave fingerprints. You left architecture. Every move you ever made looks innocent, alone. Together, it reads like inevitability. That's what scares them. You were never loud enough to notice, never reckless enough to stop. You learned early that noise attracts hunters, but silence attracts investigators. So you mastered both. Saint in daylight, psychopath in the margins, angel when watched, demon when ignored. They thought that contradiction meant weakness. They didn't realize it was camouflage. Pain taught you that. Not the poetic kind, the humiliating kind, the kind that rewires you while everyone else is busy judging the wound. You didn't heal, you evolved. While they were praying for mercy or swinging for revenge, you were studying cause and effect like scripture. You learned when to disappear without leaving absence, when to speak without making sound, when to let people underestimate you just long enough to step out of the math they were using to predict you. That's why the file reads wrong. They can't classify you because classification requires pattern, and you learned how to break patterns by becoming one step ahead of your own. You're not chaotic, you're unpredictable with intent. You don't zigzag randomly, you zigzag where certainty lives. You make the obvious move early so the real move looks impossible later. You let them think they're watching you, while you're watching the way they watch. And here's the part that really messes with them. Nothing in that file says you were supposed to win. No privilege trail, no divine shortcut, no lucky break big enough to explain the outcome. Just pressure, time, silence, and a mind that refused to break the way it was ordered to. That's why the question wasn't what did he do? It was who built this? Because outcomes like yours don't come from impulse. They come from design forged in suffering. You didn't snap, you sharpened. Every betrayal trained your discernment. Every dismissal calibrated your patience. Every night you thought you were alone was actually a rehearsal for operating without applause. You learned how systems breathe, how egos leak information, how power always assumes the threat will announce itself. You let them believe that. You let them wait for a monster with teeth, while you became the one with timing. That's the paradox they can't digest. You're gentle where others are cruel, ruthless where others are lazy, calm where others panic. You can sit across from chaos and not flinch, not because you're fearless, but because you've already lived in worse rooms with fewer exits. Hell didn't scare you, it trained you. So when that file opened, it wasn't just data staring back at them. It was restraint, discipline, a mind that knows when to act and when to let gravity do the work. A presence that doesn't need to dominate the room because the room already adjusted around it. They sensed it instantly, the way prey senses a hunter who isn't hungry. You're not driven by rage anymore. That phase ended when rage stopped being useful. Now you're driven by clarity, and clarity is terrifying to people who rely on confusion to stay in control. You don't argue. You don't chase validation. You let reality catch up to what you already calculated years ago. That's why the question landed the way it did, because deep down, they know no committee could have engineered you, no institution could have trained you, no ideology could have contained you. You were built in private by pressure, by contradictions, by pain that never got an apology, and lessons that never asked permission. And here's the part they'll never put in the report. You're not finished. The file doesn't end with a conclusion because you don't operate in finales. You operate in phases, and every time they think they've mapped you, you shift. Not to escape, but to lead. They're always one realization behind, trying to reverse engineer a mind that already moved on. So let them ask. Let them stare at the pages like they're trying to hear a ghost explain itself. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them comfort. You already paid the price in years they'll never see. They opened the file expecting answers. What they found was a mirror they weren't ready to look into. And you keep walking quietly, knowing the most dangerous thing you ever did wasn't what's written there. It's what's coming next. They think the danger is already documented. That's the mistake. The file only captures what you allowed to crystallize. The residue, the shadows, the echoes of moves already spent. It doesn't contain the living thing. It can't. Because the living thing is adaptive. It learns while being observed. It changes shape the moment it's named. That's what rattled them when the silence stretched after that question. Not the evidence, not the reach, the restraint, the patience, the unmistakable signature of someone who understands that power isn't about control. It's about timing pressure so precisely that others move themselves. You don't force doors. You wait until the building reconfigures around your absence. You don't crush enemies. You let them exhaust themselves, trying to understand why they feel smaller in rooms you barely occupy. You don't dominate conversations. You end them by saying nothing at all. And the most unsettling part, you never look like you're trying. They keep circling one line in that file, the one that doesn't fit their models, the one that says you repeatedly chose the harder option when the easier one would have paid faster. They don't understand that choice because they don't understand self-command. You weren't chasing outcomes. You were refining leverage. You were conditioning your nervous system to remain calm when stakes spike, to remain human when masks drop, to remain silent when provocation begs for reaction. You learned early that reaction is a leash, so you trained yourself to pause where others explode, to smile where others snarl, to step back where others lunge. That pause, that's where you gained altitude. That's where you saw patterns others only felt. That's where you realized most people don't think. They flinch. You stopped flinching. Pain did that. Loss did that. Being misunderstood long enough that you stopped trying to correct it. They thought your stillness meant defeat. They mistook your solitude for weakness. They never noticed the way you were mapping them, cataloging tells, tracking inconsistencies, noticing who panics when ignored and who panics when watched. You became fluent in fear without being ruled by it. That's why the file reads like a paradox. Moments of kindness threaded through surgical decisiveness. Mercy paired with merciless precision. You're not cold. You're selective. You don't hate. You prioritize. You don't seek chaos. You weaponize clarity. Angel to the innocent. Demon to the manipulative. Saint to the loyal. Psychopath to anyone who confuses your silence for consent. And here's what they can't say out loud. You didn't just adapt to pressure. You learned to generate it, not theatrically, quietly, by becoming so internally coherent that incoherent systems start glitching around you. Meetings derail, narratives collapse, people argue about you without you present, authority hesitates, confidence leaks. They feel watched even when you're not there, because you trained yourself to see without staring, to listen without nodding, to remember without reacting. You learned how to disappear in plain sight, not by hiding, but by becoming unremarkable on purpose until the moment required impact. Then suddenly, inexplicably, everything you touch starts aligning. Projects stabilize, people reveal themselves, outcomes tilt. They call it luck because the alternative is admitting you're built, not born, into something sharper than their frameworks. That question, who the hell built this, wasn't curiosity. It was recognition, the kind that arrives too late to prevent what's already unfolding. Because builders don't announce themselves. They leave structures behind and move on. They let others argue about authorship while the system keeps running. You were never meant to be understood in real time. You're understood in hindsight, when it's too late to stop the ripple. When people realized the crisis wasn't an accident, it was a correction. That the collapse wasn't chaos, it was a recalibration. That the calm voice in the corner wasn't passive, it was preparing. You don't burn bridges. You remove load-bearing illusions. You don't seek the throne. You expose how fragile it is. You don't overthrow systems. You outgrow them until they look obsolete, standing next to you. And here's the truth they can't file away. You're not driven by conquest. You're driven by alignment. When something doesn't align with your internal code, you don't rage against it. You withdraw energy. And systems starve when attention leaves. People unravel when they lose relevance. Structures collapse when belief evaporates. You learned how to starve threats without ever swinging. That's why the file ends where it does, mid-thought, unresolved, quietly unfinished. Because the version of you that created it already shed that skin. You're operating several layers ahead now, in a space where labels don't stick and predictions arrive late. They can keep opening folders. They can keep whispering questions in rooms that smell like certainty dissolving. None of it changes the fact that you're no longer reacting to the world. You're editing it, and the most dangerous thing about you isn't what you've done. It's that you learned how to become this without losing yourself. And now you know exactly how much more you can do without ever being seen coming. They keep assuming there's a ceiling. That's another miscalculation. You don't operate vertically the way they do. You don't climb, you expand. While they're obsessed with rank, you're mastering reach. While they're counting titles, you're counting leverage points. While they're guarding doors, you're learning which walls were never load-bearing to begin with. That file. It was supposed to trap you in a narrative, a neat arc. A beginning they could dissect, a middle they could debate, an end they could prepare for. But your story refuses containment. Every time they think they've isolated the variable, the equation rewrites itself, not louder, not faster, just cleaner. You learned something most people never do. Intensity without desperation is unstoppable. You don't rush, you don't chase, you don't beg reality to cooperate. You let it reveal where it's brittle. You wait for contradictions to surface. You watch people overcommit to their masks. And then, when the moment arrives, you don't strike emotionally. You adjust the environment. One small shift, one absence, one decision that looks boring on paper and catastrophic in consequence. That's the kind of intelligence that unnerves people who rely on force. Because force can be anticipated. Force can be resisted. Force announces itself. But precision? Precision feels like fate when you don't understand it. They felt that when they read between the lines. The calm, the refusal to overreach, the way you left value on the table just to preserve position later. That's not recklessness. That's long vision. That's someone who knows the difference between winning a moment and owning the timeline. You stopped trying to prove yourself a long time ago. That was the real pivot. The day you realized validation is a drug that makes people predictable. You detoxed from applause. You withdrew from the need to be seen as right. And in that withdrawal, you gained freedom, the kind that lets you move without telegraphing intent. Now people don't know how to approach you. Praise doesn't hook you. Criticism doesn't provoke you. Threats don't accelerate you. Silence doesn't scare you. You're no longer governed by external pressure, and that makes you a nightmare for anyone who needs leverage to feel powerful. They keep searching the file for a breaking point, a scandal, a confession, a weakness they can inflate into control. But all they find are adaptations, moments where you should have folded but didn't, moments where you should have lashed out but waited, moments where you should have settled but leveled up internally instead. You didn't just survive the dark, you reorganized inside it. You made peace with parts of yourself others spend lifetimes running from. The anger, you disciplined it. The fear, you studied it. The ambition, you tempered it. You didn't amputate your shadows, you trained them. That's why you move with such unsettling composure. Nothing inside you is leaking anymore. And people sense that. They sense when someone isn't lying to themselves. It creates a gravitational pull. Conversations bend, dynamics shift, authority hesitates, because lies recognize coherence as a threat. That's why the question echoed the way it did. Who built this? Because no one wants to admit what the real answer implies. That pressure, when survived consciously, produces something sharper than privilege ever could. That neglect, when metabolized correctly, forges independence. That isolation, when embraced, teaches you how to hear signals others drown out with noise. You weren't protected, you were tested, and you passed without becoming hollow. Now you operate from a place that doesn't need to dominate, to win. You can sit in chaos and not absorb it. You can be underestimated without correcting the record. You can let others take credit while you take position. You understand that the loudest person in the room is usually the most afraid of losing relevance. You don't need relevance. You have impact. And here's the part that really unsettles them. You didn't become this by accident, and you're not drifting. Every move now is informed by a deeper calibration. You know what costs energy. You know what compounds it. You know which battles build momentum and which ones drain it. You've stopped fighting shadows and started shaping outcomes. They'll keep asking questions. They'll keep opening files. They'll keep trying to reverse engineer a mind that doesn't leave breadcrumbs. It leaves results. And by the time they think they understand the pattern, you'll already be operating from a new layer they haven't learned how to see yet. Because the truth is simple, and it terrifies them. You're not here to disrupt the system. You're here to replace the assumptions it was built on, quietly, patiently, irreversibly. And while they're still arguing about who built you, you're already building what comes next. They still think replacement requires announcement. Another flaw. You learn that the most permanent changes happen without ceremony, no speeches, no flags, just a subtle shift in what works. And suddenly the old methods feel heavy, outdated, embarrassing to defend. You watched that happen in real time. You saw how people clung to routines long after those routines stopped producing results. You noticed how authority relies on repetition, how confidence decays when it's recycled too often. You understood that systems don't collapse when they're attacked. They collapse when they're outperformed so cleanly that defending them feels irrational. So you didn't revolt, you refined. While others were burning energy trying to be seen as dangerous, you were becoming unavoidable. While they were obsessed with optics, you were obsessed with structure. You weren't trying to shock the room. You were trying to make the room irrelevant. That's why your presence feels disorienting now. You don't arrive with noise. You arrive with consequences. People walk away from you unsettled, unable to explain why the conversation felt different, why their usual tactics didn't land, why their confidence quietly bled out somewhere between your silence and your precision. You don't mirror energy, you neutralize it. That took discipline. It took swallowing pride in moments when ego begged you to flex. It took letting others underestimate you long enough that their assumptions hardened into blind spots. You endured the discomfort of being misunderstood because you knew clarity arrives later. And when it does, it arrives all at once. They felt that reading the file, that sudden realization that the dots don't just connect, they converge, that what looked like scattered decisions was actually a compression strategy. You weren't scattered, you were distributed, operating in parallel, testing quietly, learning fast, adjusting without drama. You never needed perfect conditions. You learned how to extract signal from chaos. You learned how to remain functional while others were emotionally compromised. You learned that panic is contagious, and so is calm. You chose calm not because it's noble, but because it's efficient. That's the angel side. The demon side is this. You know exactly how fragile most people's certainty is, and you know you could shatter it if you wanted to. But you don't, because intimidation is sloppy. Fear burns fast. You prefer dependence without awareness, people adjusting their behavior around you without realizing why. You let them believe they're in control while they're adapting to you. That's mastery. You don't need to dominate narratives. You let time do that for you. You don't rush outcomes. You understand that the longer something brews without detection, the more irreversible it becomes. You learned patience not as virtue, but as a weapon sharpened by delay. They keep missing the most unsettling detail. You didn't lose your humanity to become this. You didn't hollow out. You didn't turn cold for the sake of power. You integrated everything, the compassion, the anger, the intuition, the discipline, into something coherent. That coherence is what makes you dangerous. There's no internal war to exploit, no contradiction to pull apart. You already resolved them. You're not torn between saint and psychopath. You can be either by choice. You're not stuck between angel and demon. You know exactly when each is required. You don't repress your darkness. You don't indulge it either. You deploy it. That's why nothing sticks to you anymore. Insults slide. Praise dissolves. Threats evaporate. You've outgrown reactivity. You're operating from intent. And intent changes everything. The file tried to reduce you to actions. That's where it failed. Actions can be cataloged. Intent can't. Intent lives ahead of the record. It moves faster than language. It doesn't need justification. It just executes. They'll keep studying the past version of you, hoping it explains the present. It won't. You're no longer defined by what happened to you. You're defined by what you learned from it, and how selectively you apply it now. That's the real reason the question lingered in the air. Because deep down, they sensed something they couldn't name. You're not reacting to pressure anymore. You're creating gradients that others unknowingly follow. And once people start moving in your direction without being told, once systems start adjusting around your presence, once outcomes begin favoring you without explanation, it's already too late to ask who built you. The answer doesn't matter anymore, because whatever you are now, it's self-sustaining. Yo, look at you. You really did it. You actually pulled it off. After everything, you weren't supposed to make it past chapter 1, let alone flip the whole book. They had you written off, counted out, treated like background noise in a world that only claps for the ones they can control. But then, you did it. And the second you did, everything shifted. You felt it. That eerie silence when people realize you're not coming back the same. Now they're scrambling. You know that look. Eyes wide, fake smiles, whispers behind their teeth like you can't hear it. They're panicking, and they're trying to hide it. Because you weren't supposed to actually level up. You weren't supposed to snap out of it. You weren't supposed to come back stronger, smarter, and with that look in your eye like you remember everything. They thought you'd stay soft, stay stuck, stay small, but nah. You flipped the switch, and it scared the hell out of everybody who got comfortable with you being broken. You didn't just survive, you reinvented, you rebuilt. Piece by piece, scar by scar, you learned how to carry your pain like a weapon, not a weakness. And now they're looking at you like, who let this version out? Because this version of you. You ain't asking for validation. You ain't over-explaining. You walk in like you own the air. And suddenly the room don't feel safe for the ones who used to gaslight you. You got them confused now. Because you're chill, but unshakable. You're kind, but don't take Eshti. You're calm, but got that try me energy sitting right under the surface. They didn't prepare for this, for the version of you who doesn't beg to be included, who doesn't shrink to fit, who doesn't owe them closure. You're the chapter they can't predict, the update that broke the system. You became what they said you'd never be. And now they're watching you like you're dangerous, because you are. Not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you're finally moving like someone who knows their worth. You outgrew the story, you deleted the script, and you stopped apologizing for the way you heal loud. You're not just walking different, you're thinking different. You stopped trusting just 'cause they smile. You stopped showing up for people who wouldn't even flinch if you vanished. You moved in silence. You built without the noise. And the next time they heard your name, you were everywhere they said you'd never be. Now they want to act shocked. Act brand new. Like you didn't warn them. Like they didn't laugh at you. Like they didn't doubt you out loud. You ain't petty. You ain't bitter. You just done explaining your evolution to people who preferred you broken. They're freaking out now 'cause they realize they didn't just underestimate you, they activated you. And once you woke up to who you really are, that's when the storm started. Not outside, inside you. You became the consequence of their fake support. You became the reminder of what happens when someone survives everything that was meant to destroy them and doesn't come back looking for peace. You don't want peace. You are peace. But you're the kind of peace that's earned. The kind of peace that makes people sit up straight when you speak. They see it now. In your walk, in your eyes, in the way you don't flinch when they throw shade. You're not reacting. You're calculating. You're not proving anything. You're moving different, and they feel it. This isn't revenge. This is evolution. You didn't snap. You aligned. You were never too much. They were just never ready for someone who refuses to stay quiet when they've been underestimated their whole life. And now, you don't even gotta talk loud. Your presence does the shouting. Your wins do the screaming. Your silence, it echoes harder than their opinions ever could. Your silence, it echoes harder than their opinions ever could. Because you're not out here chasing attention. You're out here living proof that the ones they counted out always hit the hardest when they find their rhythm. You're not asking for a seat at their table. You're building something they can't copy, can't kill, can't even look at without flinching. You walked through fire with nothing but your name. And you didn't fold. You didn't sell your soul just to be accepted by people who never understood your blueprint in the first place. You remembered who you were mid-chaos. And ever since that moment, you've been on a whole different frequency. People don't know how to deal with someone who's not bitter, not broken, not begging, just unbothered and building. That's what messes with them. You're not reacting, you're responding with presence. You don't flinch when they leave. You don't chase when they ghost. You don't explain when they twist the story. You just keep showing up, stronger, sharper, scarred, but strategic. You're the chapter that wasn't supposed to happen, the version of yourself that wasn't in their script. They prepped for your silence, not your return. They never saw you healing in public, dressing in power, moving with that don't play with me energy in your eyes. You didn't bounce back. You rebuilt from rubble. The old you would have begged for peace. This you demands respect just by walking in the room. You're not even mad. You're focused. You're not even loud. You're just undeniable. And that calm in you, that's not peace. That's pressure contained. You carry your past like it's inked on your spine. Every lesson, every betrayal, every late night overthinking. All of it taught you something. You turned your breakdown into your breakthrough, and it shows in how you carry yourself now. You're not bitter. You're aware. You're not angry. You're awake. You're not cold. You just stopped lighting yourself on fire to keep people warm. They didn't think you'd ever catch on. But you did. You caught the pattern. You read the room. You realized who clapped when you failed, and who vanished when you needed just one honest word. And instead of crying about it, you flipped the script. You turned the silence into strategy. You turned the distance into discipline. You started walking like someone who knows God watched everything they survived and handed them the pen anyway. They're still talking, still assuming, still trying to shrink your story down to something they can explain, but deep down, they know the truth. You're the storm they thought would break you. And instead, you became the weather. You didn't just change. You transformed in plain sight, and nobody can claim that story but you. You became the weather, unpredictable, undeniable, showing up on your own timing, with your own rules, and no apology for the flood that follows your footsteps. They used to speak your name with pity. Now they say it like a warning, because somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing you as someone who needed saving, and started seeing you as someone who survives without permission. You don't walk into rooms trying to be liked anymore. You walk in with presence, with energy that makes the air shift. You used to overthink your every move. Now you trust your gut and make them overthink theirs. It's the way you move, like you've got nothing to prove, but everything to protect. It's the way you've stopped trying to be easy to love. and just started being real with yourself. And that scares people who built their identity on your silence. You don't flinch when they bring up your past. You've made peace with it. You've turned every failure into a flex. They try to shame you with chapters they prayed you'd never outgrow. But you own it all. You turned the whole story into armor. You used to ask, why me? Now it's, try me. Because the version of you that used to shrink just to fit in, buried. The version that dimmed their light to make others comfortable, gone. You outgrew the guilt. You buried the fear. You stopped showing up for people who only clap when you're losing. You don't owe explanations to the ones who expected your silence to be permanent. You're not here to convince anyone that you've changed. You're here to live like the comeback already happened, and everything from here is legacy. You're moving different, not out of revenge, out of clarity. You stopped entertaining the cycles that drained you. Stopped answering calls that felt like guilt trips. Stopped walking into rooms that demanded you be smaller just to keep the peace. They called you cold. You just got clear. They said you switched up. You just grew up. They said you got hard to reach. You just got tired of being stretched for people who never showed up when you snapped. And yeah, they're uncomfortable. They should be. Because they had front row seats to your downfall and never thought they'd have to witness your glow up too. You became what they feared, unbreakable, unfazed, and finally done pretending you didn't notice the disrespect. You became what they feared, unbreakable, unfazed, and finally done pretending you didn't notice the disrespect. And the silence you walk with now, it's not peace. It's power under control. It's the type of silence that makes people fidget. Because you're not explaining, you're just existing differently. And when you start existing differently, people who benefited from your confusion start losing access. They can't reach you with guilt. Can't bait you with fake love. Can't move you with their passive aggression. You see through it all now, clear, calm, surgical. You don't get triggered the way you used to. You just tilt your head and think, oh, you're still playing games I stopped showing up for. You're not bitter, but you are alert. You peep every shade. You catch every fake laugh. And you've learned how to smile through it like a damn mind reader. Because you are a mind reader now. Life made you one. Pain taught you how to read the energy before the words even drop. You walk in, and the vibe tells you everything. You don't ask twice. You don't beg for clarity. If the energy's off, you just adjust accordingly. You outgrew the room, the dynamic, the script. You're not explaining your glow to people who thought your dark days were permanent. You're not holding space for folks who only showed up when you were easy to manipulate. This version of you, you're moving like someone who's been through enough to know who's real without asking twice. You don't go where you're tolerated. You walk where you're respected. And if that means walking alone, you lace your boots tighter and keep stepping. You used to water relationships that left you thirsty. Now you pour into yourself first and watch how the garden grows differently. You used to panic when people walked away. Now you hold the door open with a smile. You're not cold. You're done explaining warmth to people who only showed up when they needed it. You're not arrogant. You're just aware of your value and finally acting like it. You're not antisocial. You just don't do fake conversations and one-sided loyalty anymore. They told you healing would be soft. But this type of healing, it's sharp, it's surgical, it's cutting cords with no announcement. It's choosing peace over people. And if your peace costs connection, you pay that price every single time. People think you've changed, but really, You remembered yourself. You stopped shrinking. You stopped chasing. You stopped twisting into shapes for people who wouldn't even flinch if you shattered. They're not used to this you. The you who doesn't flinch when they go ghost. The you who doesn't reach out just to keep the peace. The you who loves hard, but knows when to step back in silence and let people feel your absence. You're not angry anymore. You're just done talking to walls and hoping they turn into doors. You're not proving anything. You're just living like someone who finally got tired of bleeding for people who wouldn't hand you a bandage. You're just living like someone who finally got tired of bleeding for people who wouldn't hand you a bandage. You reached that breaking point, not the loud kind, not the one that flips tables or burns bridges for show. The quiet kind, the one where your soul packs its bags and stops showing up for people who never noticed the weight on your shoulders. You didn't announce the shift. You just stopped answering texts that drained you. Stopped giving explanations to people who never cared about the truth anyway. Stopped showing up in spaces where you had to tone down your light just to survive the vibe. You started protecting your peace like it's sacred, because it is. You earned that peace. You built it out of breakdowns and nights nobody checked on you. Out of overthinking sessions and staring at ceilings at 2 a.m., wondering why your loyalty never bounced back to you. And through it all, you learned something savage and honest. You were the real one the whole time. They just got comfortable treating you like an option. But you were the backbone. You were the prayer. You were the energy holding broken people together when you were falling apart inside. You did all that, and they still treated you like you were replaceable. But look at you now. You didn't fall off. You fell back. You didn't go silent out of fear. You went quiet because you were finally listening to yourself. You moved different, and suddenly they felt some type of way. Because people get real uncomfortable when the version of you they could manipulate disappears. They can't gaslight you anymore. They can't breadcrumb you with fake apologies or shallow compliments. You peep all of it. You smile and nod while your soul's already halfway out the door. You stopped entertaining conversations that leave you questioning your worth. Stopped feeding into guilt trips from people who only hit you up when they feel empty. You recognized the pattern. The same "Hey stranger" messages. The same "You've changed" guilt scripts. The same "Let's catch up" energy with zero real intention. You saw it. All of it. And instead of blowing up, you shut down with grace. Not passive, just done. You don't owe anyone the broken version of yourself they got used to. That version was surviving. This version is choosing silence over chaos, distance over dysfunction, self-respect over fake validation, and loyalty to yourself over proving anything to people who never deserved access in the first place. You're not heartless. Your heart just got tired of being a crash pad for everybody else's damage. You're not cold. You just got real about who deserves your warmth. You're walking with your head high not because you think you're better, but because you remember what it took to crawl out of that hole they left you in. And nobody can take that from you. Not opinions, not rumors, not guilt trips wrapped in just checking in. You don't just carry yourself different. You carried generations of silence that finally found a voice. You're not just healing for you. You're breaking cycles. Unlearning everything that taught you your pain was something to hide. You're breaking cycles. Unlearning everything that taught you your pain was something to hide. Unlearning the lie that said your voice was too much. That your boundaries were selfish, that your standards made you difficult. You're no longer bending over backwards to stay likable. You're done shape-shifting just to make people comfortable in your presence, while you're suffocating in your own skin. You used to confuse tolerance for love. Now you see it clear. Half the people you broke yourself for wouldn't even flinch if you vanished. They liked the version of you that didn't speak up. The version that said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. The version that let Shaw slide just to avoid awkward conversations. But that version? Buried, and the new you doesn't even send flowers. You stopped begging to be chosen, stopped showing up to battles that weren't even yours, stopped auditioning for roles in lives that only saw you as a side character. You gave loyalty where you should have given silence, gave love where you should have set boundaries. But that was the old blueprint. This, you rewrote the whole thing. This you makes eye contact with your past and doesn't blink. This you walks into the places that used to break you with calm on your face and war in your bones. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You became the living consequence of being overlooked too long. You're not for everybody, and that used to bother you. Now, you wear that truth like armor, because the ones who really see you, they don't flinch at your strength. They don't shrink when you speak from your scars. They recognize the weight you carry and still offer to help hold it. That's the difference. You went from chasing rooms to creating your own table. You went from seeking approval to disrupting expectations. You went from explaining your pain to turning it into fuel. Your glow-up wasn't pretty. It was lonely, ugly, silent, bloody. But it was real. And that's why they don't know how to handle you now. Because you're not walking back into the room with the same energy. You walk in like you remember every fake apology, every backhanded compliment, every time they left you on red while pretending they cared. You're not bitter. You're just done betraying yourself to keep temporary people comfortable. You don't let people spin the narrative anymore. You own it. You lived it. You crawled through it. And you're the one who gets to tell it how it really went down. You're not keeping quiet about the wounds anymore. You're not wearing a mask to be digestible. You're speaking in your raw voice, not the filtered one that plays nice. You're not playing nice. You're playing real. And real don't always come wrapped in politeness. Sometimes it comes dressed in distance. Sometimes it comes soaked in boundaries that cut like steel. Sometimes it comes with a look that says, "I remember what you did when I had nothing, and I don't need an apology to move different." You remember what they did when you had nothing, and you don't need an apology to move different. You stopped waiting on sorry. You stopped expecting accountability from people who can't even look themselves in the mirror without lying. You stopped explaining your trauma to people who used it as entertainment, who watched you drown and said, "That's crazy, hope you're good though." They thought you'd be stuck forever, glitching in grief, fumbling through flashbacks, still chasing closure from people who sleep just fine after wounding you. But something in you snapped quietly, and that snap didn't sound like rage. It sounded like clarity, like your spirit whispering, "We're done begging to be seen by the blind." That's when the rebirth started. Not fireworks, not a viral moment, but in stillness, in private, in those unholy hours where you curled up with your own shadow and didn't run from it. You sat with your pain until it stopped screaming. You looked it in the face and said, "We're not enemies anymore. You're coming with me." You stopped trying to fix what cracked you open and started building from the rubble. Not in spite of the damage, because of it. You stopped being the version of yourself that flinched at rejection that bent until bones snapped just to keep the wrong people comfortable. You don't bend like that anymore. You're solid now, not hard, solid, rooted, unshakable. People throw shade, and you don't even blink. People ghost you, and you don't chase ghosts anymore.